So I'm speaking in Santa Monica. I get done and walking out to my rental car. I'm approached by a panhandler. By the way, that is a term that goes back to the time where they stuck out a pan for donations, or their arm was like a panhandle. But today, I don't know what the politically correct phrase for these people is. Home disadvantaged, economically challenged. They're the people that ask you for money. And I know you think speakers make stuff up, to get a laugh, but I make nothing up. My life is a lot weirder than my limited imagination. This guy stuck out his hand. He said, "Hey, buddy, can you spare $100? Now, I know it's California. The cost of living is higher there. I get that. This guy did something that most leaders today have a difficult time doing. He got my attention. He was kind of able to break my preoccupation, get my attention, so I actually engaged him. I said, buddy, if you'd asked me for $1, I'd have given it to you. Wouldn't even have thought about it. And if you'd asked me for $10, I might have given it to you because you had the chutzpah to ask. But $100, come on, are you kidding me?" Guy gets a little irritable at this point. He said, "Look, either give me the money or don't. Just don't tell me how to run my business." I tell you that story today because I think most people believe that God is trying to tell them how to run their business, how to run their lives. And most people say, "Give me the blessing or don't, just don't tell me how to run my life." Take delight in the Lord is an interesting phrase, of course, from the Psalms, because what's interesting is it's not about ask God or beg God or implore God. God wants us to be delighted, but we have to take the delight, and too often we just don't pursue it. We get too busy, too preoccupied, too distracted. Helen mentioned one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible, John 10:10. I particularly like the NIV version because most of us grew up believing that Jesus said, "I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly." And abundantly just means in excess. It means more. But I love the NIV because it says, Jesus said, "I came that you might have life in the full." What's fuller than full? Nothing. Full is as good as it gets. Full is the best. God is basically saying, I want you, through Christ, to have life as I intended you to have it, to the very best. And of course, that's what God wants for us. It's harder to accomplish, not because of anything God has or hasn't done, but because of our confusion about what we must do or not do to get it. When I speak to people about faith in the marketplace, a couple of things I always say. The first is we are not Christian business people. That annoys me. Why is Christian the adjective and business people the identifier? We are business people doing Christians. We are people who have faith who are doing business. Our identity is not in our businesses. At least it shouldn't be. For a lot of us it is. There was a time in my life where I was so wrapped up in my career that I couldn't separate my personal from my professional life. So we are business doing Christian people. But the second thing I like to point out is that 70% of the American population says their mission is defined by their work. Not by their faith, not by their family, but by their work. Which means for those of us that have a greater mission than just doing business, we have something to offer that's very, very important. If we can offer it in such a way that it's truly appealing. We forget that we did not come to protest, but to proclaim. You would think today, if you ask people, what do Christians believe? They can tell you what we don't believe, what we don't like, what we don't agree with. But they can't really tell you what we like or what we believe in because we protest far more than we proclaim. So I've always wondered, what does it mean to have life to the full? Many years ago when I moved to Denver, I was single living alone. I moved into Washington Park. If you want to know, if you're familiar with the area, 677 South Williams, intersection of Williams and Exposition, Washington Park. Since I was single, I moved in. I'd lived there 2 days. There was a knock on my front door. I opened my front door, and standing there was a relatively short fellow. He was about 5'2", 5'3", weighed about 115 pounds, wearing a blue-gray uniform, carrying a bag. He says, "Good morning, Mr. Sanborn. My name is Fred. I am your postman. I just stopped by to welcome you to the neighborhood, introduce myself, and find out a little bit about you and what you do for a living." I've been receiving mail all my adult life. I can't ever recall getting a personal introduction to my postal carrier, but I thought it was a nice touch. I said, "Fred, thanks for stopping by." I said, "I'm a professional speaker. I do not have a real job." Fred said, "Well, that's important for me to know. If you're a speaker, you must travel a lot." Now, back then, before I got married, I did about 240 days a year on the road. And I told him that. Fred said, great. If you'll just give me your calendar so that I know when you're in town. I'll hold your mail for you. I'll bundle it. I'll only deliver it on the days that you're here to receive it. I never had a choice a la carte mail service before either. I said, Fred, that's really not necessary. I've got this box nailed here next to the door. Just leave the mail in the box. I'll pick it up when I come back into town. Fred said, oh, Mr. Sanborn, let me point out, burglars watch for mail in your box. I mean, if your box is full of mail, they know you're gone. It increases the likelihood that you'll get robbed. Here's what I'd recommend instead. He said, I'll be glad to put mail in your box as long as the lid closes. That way, nobody will know that you're gone. Any mail that doesn't fit in your box, I can put in between the screen door and the front door. Nobody can see it there. And if you're gone a long time and that space becomes too full of mail, I'll just hold the rest of your mail for you until you come back into town. Fred is more worried about my mail than I am. But he is the postal professional. Let me just interject something here. A professional is someone who's more worried about the solution to your problem their product or service solves than you are. Let me say that again. A professional is someone who's more worried about the solution to your problem their product or service solves than you are. Professional educator, more worried about you or your kids learning than you are. Professional healthcare provider, more worried about your health than you are. Professional consultant, more worried about your business growth than you are. And I don't mean that in the codependent kind of way that absolves you of responsibility. I just mean you so implicitly trust that provider, you never think about using a different provider. That's the ultimate business mode. To be so good at what you do that your customer says, I don't have to worry about pest control because I've got my friends the Meads that do that. I don't have to worry about growth because I have an organization that I belong to of like-minded people of faith that help me grow. And that's the kind of professional we all want to be. So I say to Fred, I say, okay, let's try that. I go out of town, I come back a couple weeks later, I'm unlocking my front door. Now, in Wash Park, the houses are small. My front porch is half the size of this riser. As I'm unlocking the front door, I notice my doormat is missing. I look around and I see my doormat's in the corner, but it's covering something. See, here's what had happened. UPS had misdelivered a box of mine 5 doors down, left my box on somebody else's porch. Lucky for me, Fred the postman was on the job. Fred saw my box on the wrong porch, picked up this heavy box, carried it down to my porch, put it in the corner, wrote a personal note of explanation on it, then tried to disguise it with a doormat so nobody would take it. Not only is Fred delivering the mail, now he's picking up slack for UPS. Now, the first time I ever told this story, I was speaking at a bank in L.A., downtown L.A. I got done with a speech in the story. A guy waits in the back of the room until everybody's gone. He comes up, he said, now, be honest. Were you talking about the United States Postal Service? Or does Denver have their own? And I said, no, this is incredible service from a very unlikely source. That first Christmas I lived in my house, I was so grateful, I left a gift in the box for Fred. After Christmas, the first day that mail was delivered, I had an unusual letter in my mail. See, the letter had a stamp on it, but the stamp wasn't canceled. And I see that the letter is from Fred Shea. That is Fred's full name. Fred and his wife live in Northland. I lived in Denver. Fred knows it's a felony to put unposted mail in a box. So even though he carried the letter from his house to my house, he still put a stamp on just to keep it legal. So after I cut the stamp off, I read the letter. The letter says, Dear Mr. Sanborn, thank you for remembering me at Christmas. I'm flattered that you talk about me in your speeches and seminars. I hope I can continue to provide exceptional service. Sincerely, Fred the Postman. First time to my knowledge he signed his name, Fred the Postman. So let's fast forward the tape. I met my wife, Darla, in 1995. We got married. She moved in. And in 1997, we were expecting our first son, and we moved to Highlands Ranch, where we live today. But for almost 10 years, Fred delivered my mail and then her mail. And now, thanks to CCBA, you have a copy of the full story. Think of it as a hardback handout. You can go deeper, but thanks to them, you have a story of Fred the postman But even if you read the book, there's two things you will not know. And the first is, when the book came out in 2004, Fred had been an employee of the United States Postal Service for 27 years and never recognized by his employer. His customers knew he was amazing, I know, because they called me and sent me emails and letters thanking me for getting Fred recognition. His co-workers found him inspiring, but nobody in management noticed. Here's a powerful idea for the marketplace today. If you want to have more Freds, more top performers, more huge contributors, pay attention to the ones you've already got. Because too much of our time is spent on our problems and our deficits and not on our heroes and our superstars. You know, we kind of think, well, they're doing a good job, we'll just let them go. And over time, superstar things, so does anybody even notice anymore? So they stop being a superstar, and what do? We notice. As Peter Drucker said, we feed our problems and starve our opportunities. So finally, Fred got the recognition I personally think he deserved. Second thing you would not know is my favorite line in the book. At the end of the book, there's a chapter called The Spirit of Fred. Because you see, I'm interested in two things. What successful people do, but more importantly, why they do it. The motive, if you will. So I interviewed Fred. I said, Fred, why do you do it? And he talks about 6 things, but my favorite one is he said, I lay in bed at the end of the day, I only worry about one thing. How many things do you worry about? Fred said, I only worry about one thing. The only thing I worry about, did I waste any of the day I just finished? Did I waste any of the day I just finished? Irenaeus said, the glory of God is a man or woman fully alive. See, that's what I think Fred was worrying about. And I'm going to summarize 37 years on the platform in 8 books in one sentence. You ready? Fear nothing but to waste the present moment. Because if you take care of the moments become your life. But so often we sleepwalk through life. I've been guilty of being in an airport with a 3-hour delay, and you know what I did with the 3 hours? Totally wasted them being preoccupied with the delay. Instead of making a phone call or relaxing or having a cup of coffee or reading a book or doing something constructive, I was so preoccupied with the delay, I sleptwalked through 3 hours of my life. So I wrote this book called The Fred Factor. It's about a real person. He exists. He's retired now. He still lives in North Glen. He's the father of 2, grandfather of 2. And he and his wife, Kathy, continue to be extraordinary people. See, the Fred Factor, because I work in primarily corporate America, I'm not paid to proselytize. However, I bring who I am to the platform. It is my goal to be covert, not overt. Because, I'm a big believer in what Bob Reiner said before he died. He said, the most effective witness for the kingdom in the marketplace will be the man or woman so good at what he or she does that others will be attracted and wonder why. But underneath, when I look at a person like Fred, who this morning Dan would have called a wow person, the first B in the B-E-S-T, be a wow person. Fred is a wow person. Fred is a person who is fully alive, making the most of every moment, and he exemplifies how I think we can not only take delight in the Lord, but give delight in the marketplace as business-doing Christians. I want to share with you today, first, the Fred principles, the ability to continually create new value for the people you live and work with through 3 things that you completely control through the grace of God: your passion, your creativity, and your commitment. Doesn't matter what your budget is, who you work for, what they do or don't give you. The Fred Factor is about passion, creativity, and commitment. They are bountiful and they're available. The second thing I want to do is I want to talk about 4 principles. And if I was going to, back in 2005, a year after the book first came out, Tom Peters picked a quote from the book as one of his favorite quotes of the year. And I didn't even realize it at the time, but it kind of not only encapsulates that book, it encapsulates all 8 of my books. Tom Peters loved this quote: nobody can prevent you from choosing to be exceptional. And that's the message I try to share with people. Don't matter how disadvantaged, how advantaged. Don't matter what you started with or didn't start with. Ultimately, to be extraordinary is a choice. We really need to teach that to kids who feel everything but extraordinary sometimes in the culture that we live in. Nobody can prevent you from choosing to be exceptional. And there are 4 principles, and I believe they're They're biblical, not in the sense that you find the principles in the Bible, but you find the underlying truth of the principles in the Bible. And the first is this: everybody makes a difference. You say, oh, Mark, I've heard that before. Actually, you haven't. You see, we grew up in a culture that told us we could make a difference. There's a difference between making a difference and being able to make a difference. I could say to you, sir, you could go to Cleveland, and you could say, I don't want to go to Cleveland, and not go to Cleveland. That's a choice. I'm saying everybody makes a difference. Listen carefully. The only question is, what kind? There's no neutral. If you meet somebody in the marketplace who won't engage you or help you, who is rude or indifferent, do you just say, oh, honey, that's okay, they're neutral? We interpret neutrality as indifference. And I'm not here to report on the world as it should be, but the world that it is. We have to choose to make a positive difference, or too often, by default, we make a negative difference. Here's the first job of leadership. You're a leader in the marketplace today, ask everybody you employ, do you know the difference you make? And if they don't, explain it to them. Everybody is a difference maker, either by design or by default. People who do not feel significant do not make a significant contribution. People who don't see the kind of activity. I love scholastic books. The president, who just passed away 18 months ago, James Robinson, said to a forklift driver once in the warehouse, he said, what is your job here? Which kind of is a stupid question. The guy was a forklift driver. But listen to what he said. He said, sir, it is my job to help children learn to love reading. See, he gets that your work isn't your job. Your work is what you do. Your job is why you do it. And if you drop a pallet and you damage a book, it takes away from the enthusiasm of the kid who reads it. Or if you misplace a pallet and the shipment's late, the kid is affected. See, everybody, forklift driver to CEO, knew what they were about at Scholastic Books. Everybody makes a difference. The only question is what kind. The first job of leadership is to prove significance to others. Second thing is it's all built on relationship. I asked Fred once, I said, Fred, how do you take such great care of everybody on your route, or route depending where you're from? I'm originally from Ohio. I said, Fred, how do you take such good care of all your customers? And he said, oh, Mark, I don't think of them as customers. I said, really? He said, no. I just think of them as friends. And it's easy to take care of your friends. John 15:15, Jesus said, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his father's business. I call you friends. I call you friends. See, that's biblical. It's relational. It's not abstract. There's some people here that heard me speak 2 weeks ago, and I said, many of the world's religions, God is unknowable, and it is a blasphemy to assume you can know him. Christianity is very unique in that God, gnosis in the New Testament, means an intimate knowledge, the knowledge of a close friend. But there's two things in life they don't teach us. Check me on this. Number one, they don't teach us how to raise kids. By the time we know how, too late. Second thing they don't teach us is how to build relationships. Unless you maybe went through premarital counseling, you didn't take a course somewhere in college or high school, Relationship Building 101. I believe we need to teach people. You know, G.K. Chesterton, two of my favorite philosophers are dead Brits, Lewis and Chesterton. Chesterton said, all men matter. You matter, I matter. It is the hardest thing in theology to understand. Many years ago, my dad died at the age of 63. I've now outlived my dad. My dad never met my wife, my kids. Well, he was dying. I was in business in Rome. And I was on the Spanish Steps, and I was watching two young people. They were sharing a bottle of wine or whiskey. They were probably high. They were a mess of humanity. And I got angry, and I said, how dare they live while my dad dies? And then later, through the grace of God, I found that scripture, all men matter. You matter, I matter. It was, for me then, the hardest thing in theology to believe, to understand. We all matter to God. God knows why. I don't. Not up to me, thankfully, or the world would be a lot worse place. But I do know this. My friend Greg Paul, who runs a ministry on Queen Street in Toronto. If you're ever in Toronto, Queen Street is the Bourbon Street of Toronto. Only worse. A lot of transgender, drug addiction, alcoholism, it's pretty bad. It's not so much touristy as just sad. And Greg ministers to people on Queen Street, and he and I did a book tour together a long time ago, and I said, Greg, I got to ask you, man, how do you minister to the homeless, the addicted, the professional prostitute, the transgendered? And he said, never forget, he said, well, Mark, we found that systematic theology doesn't really work well. Some of the profoundest words, he said, we just love them. We just love them, and we complexify what it means to be a person of faith, and we can rationalize and explain the 73 reasons why we don't engage in systematic theology, as Greg found, doesn't work like relationship building does. Number two, it's all built on relationship. What's interesting is people have no reason to change until we accept them as they are. Here's an interesting nuance in our culture. People today don't just want acceptance for behavior, they want approval, regardless of the behavior. And that's a sticking point. I can accept anyone, but I cannot approve of anything. But when I say any, I cannot approve of anything. Some things you can, some things you can't. But you can't expect people to change until you accept them. But that doesn't mean you have to agree with them. I don't understand in our culture today why disagreement is so bad. My wife loves me more than anybody on the planet, and she disagrees with me most days. We need to reach a point where we can relate and understand to people. That's the bridge. Empathy. Cognitive empathy means I understand how you feel, even if I don't feel the same way. Number two, it's all built on relationship. Number three, you can add value to everything you do. It doesn't have to cost a nickel. 2 Corinthians 6:1. We are God's co-workers. As God's co-workers. See, Augustine said, without God, man cannot. Without man, God will not. That blew my mind when I saw that phrase and read it more than superficially. To be a co-worker with God, God doesn't need me, but God wants me. God doesn't need you, but God invites you to work with him to make a bigger, better difference in your business, in your community, in your world. I think we're called to add value to the creation, which has now been flawed through sin and any number of things. I was staying at the W Hotel. I would not stay at the W Hotel in Washington, D.C., because I was raised on a farm and I'm too Midwestern. But it's a crazy expensive hotel. Client put me up there. I left a wake-up call for 7 a.m. in the morning, but I woke up early and went to the gym. So I missed my wake-up call. I got back from the gym, 7:30. I was getting ready to take a shower, and there's a knock on my door, and I look through that little peephole, and there's a guy out there in a tie I don't recognize. And he says, Mr. Sanborn. I said, yes. He said, are you awake? I said, yes. He said, you didn't answer your phone. We wanted to make sure you were awake. Do you know how amazing that is? How many of you have ever left a wake-up call that didn't come and you overslept and missed your flight and wanted to open fire in a crowded area because somebody was indifferent to delivering on a simple promise? This guy was a wow person. He was a Fred, because here's the secret. Little things make a big difference. Remember, for those of you that have lived in Denver for a while, remember it's still there actually, it's just different. On the border at 470 in Quebec. We used to go there every Monday night when our kids were little. Why? Monday night, kids used to eat free. They don't anymore, don't get excited. Monday night, kids eat free. We would go every Monday night. It was great. One night, Darla says, I'm not feeling well, get me something to go. So I take the boys and we get to On the Border, and our wait person that night, her name is Alicia, which is Spanish for Alicia. And she's really nice. And I say, we're going to order our food, but we're going to order some food to go for my wife. She's not feeling well. And at the end of dinner, Alicia brought out a plastic bag with 2 containers, and on one container she'd written, hope you're feeling better, smiley face, Alicia. And we got home and Darla said, who's Alicia? And I explained, and she was good with that. And the next time we went On the Border, we said, is Alicia working? And we sat in her section. And a couple weeks later, we went back, and her section was full. You tell me, what did we do? We waited. You know what? I never got to know the name of the manager, because Alicia had a powerful freeware. We used to call software that was freeware. Now it's just free software. She's got the most powerful mindware you can have to be a difference maker in the marketplace. It's called thoughtfulness. Because when you're going 100 miles an hour with your hair on fire, you miss those opportunities. All she had was a red ink pen and some imagination, and she was a difference maker. I wish I could remember. I think the biggest problem we have from the Garden of Eden is we keep forgetting the message, and we have to replicate it, and then we go, oh, that's right, bad idea, and then we forget, and we're, oh, bad idea. So even though I talk about this, there's times I get ahead of myself. I'm getting off an airplane, and they have a young woman who is pushing a wheelchair with a person in it, and this young woman is not very strong, and where a jetway comes together, there's like a little steel lip, and she couldn't get the wheelchair over the lip, and she was blocking everybody. And I distinctly remember, as an efficient business professional, shouldn't you hire somebody strong enough to push the wheelchair up the jetway? And I was like, excuse me, as I started to go around, and the guy behind me said, excuse me, ma'am, can I help? And God spoke to me in as clear and audible a voice as I've heard, and he said, you're a jerk. And he was right. Because I saw an obstacle. See, if you're moving too fast, life is full of obstacles. But for people like the guy behind me, he saw an opportunity to be of service. My friend Matt Messina used to be a dentist in Central Ohio. Now he's on faculty at The Ohio State University. Go ahead, make fun of it. But people, by making fun of the, which is trademarked, remember, The Ohio State University. So my friend Matt Messina, when he had a dental practice, he found out that a lot of his patients were so old they didn't have friends and relatives alive to celebrate their birthdays. So they inventoried birthday supplies and would throw a surprise birthday party if your teeth cleaning was anywhere near your birthday. But that's not the cool part of the story. They found that their older patients started scheduling their appointments on their birthdays. I have a picture of a man at 96 holding a cupcake with a candle in it, and he died 6 months later. But somebody not related by blood. And by the way, you know what the difference is? If you're a business person, you know what the difference between a partner and a vendor is? Everybody says they want to be your partner. Most businesses today don't know the difference. A vendor is somebody you have an economic transaction with. A partner is someone you have an economic transaction with and a relationship. Because if you strip out the relationship, they're just a vendor. And vendors are interchangeable. If you want to be a Fred, it's about building relationship and delivering more value. One other story I'll tell you was at the Slamp District. And this was back when collars were longer. Now they're so short, you don't really need collar stays. But in the olden days, they were long, and you had a little piece of plastic or steel that was a collar stay, kept your collar straight. I didn't have one, and my collars were curling. So it's about 10 at night. I go down to the front door, and there's a little surfer dude, long blonde hair, little cap. And I said, excuse me, sir, where may I buy collar stays? And he said, dude, you can't. I said, what do you mean? He said, no stores open, just bars and restaurants. And I go, oh man, what am I going to do? He said, oh, don't worry, I'll hook you up. And he goes to the front desk, and he gets a plastic room key and a pair of scissors and makes me collar stays. You ever been to the Omni in San Diego? It's nice. You know what I remember about it? Nothing. Except the guy who made me collar stays. Listen, in business, nobody remembers sameness. Sometimes you got to be the same just to stay in business, but what people remember is different that's valued. And as God's co-workers, we have access to the things everybody else does, but we can add value as God's co-workers to make them better. That's what number 3 is. You can add value to everything you do. It doesn't have to cost a nickel. And finally, the fourth and final principle, you can reinvent yourself every day. I believe we have to reinvent ourselves every day. The number one reason why leaders fail is because they don't stay motivated themselves. And you can't motivate others when you're burnt out and unmotivated yourself. During COVID, as I worked with leaders, and this sounds awful self-serving, it's really not, so hear me out. I said the number one job of leadership during crisis is to take care of yourself. Because a lot of leaders thought they were being sacrificial by running their health and their mental well-being into the ground. And guess what? They became very ineffective leaders. I said the reason you're taking care of yourself isn't self-serving. It's so that you can take care of the people who you lead. God wants us to take care of ourselves. That's why our bodies are temples, is because it's hard to live a high-performance life in a low-performance body. God wants what's best for us. It's not some kind of, again, obligation. It's an opportunity to bring more energy and more life to the party. We have to reinvent ourselves. And 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, any man who is in Christ is a new creation. The old has passed away. It's interesting to me, God ultimately renews us, but we still, as co-workers, have to continually renew ourselves. George Eliot, who, of course, that author's real name was Mary Ann Evans. George Eliot was a successful author who did not believe women of her time were taken seriously, especially in writing, so she adapted a man's name, George Eliot. Mary Ann Evans once said one of the favorite quotes in literary history. She said, it's never too late to become who you might have been. You know why I love that quote? Because so many people today, it's not that it's too late for them to become who they might have been. They just can't see being anything other than they already are. And that's the message of the gospel. You and I can reinvent ourselves 100 times, but in order for us to be who God intended us to be, we have to be in relationship with Him. And we are our best selves as believers. You know, we're sinners saved by grace, and a lot of Christians forget, once you're saved by grace, you're a saint, and if you sin, you're a saint who goes back to sinning. We get caught up at the sinner saved by grace because we want to have humility, but sometimes it's faux humility. It's like the young college student who said to J.P. Moreland, he said, Pastor, I'm going to be giving a little mini sermon at youth group. Would you come listen? And J.P. Moreland, the great apologist, went and listened to the young man, and the young man did a good job. And so Moreland says, son, you did a good job. And the young man, in a display of false Christian humility, said, oh, shucks, Pastor, it wasn't me, it was Jesus. Moreland said, no, it was you. Jesus would have been a lot better. He got that he was a co-creator, but he forgot that he had a responsibility not just to be himself, but to be his best self as a new creation in Christ. See, that's the message. You want to delight in the Lord? Take that message to your co-workers. Nobody can prevent you from choosing to be extraordinary. And by the way, if you want to be as extraordinary as you can possibly be, that's in relationship with Christ. He graduated 3 weeks, very intense psychological, physiological. I mean, they just basically put you through the ringer. He graduated. We're sitting in the backyard, and a friend's over and says, Hunter, what was the most important thing you learned in officer candidate school? I thought it was a good question. Hunter didn't hesitate. He said, oh, that's easy. It all boils down to one thing. I learned that I would die for the man or woman next to me on the battlefield. My friend was taken back. He had a son that was in high school. He said, Dad, that's a hard one. I'm not sure I can go along with that. And Hunter said, well, it's because you don't understand it. You see, when you're willing to die for the man and woman next to you in the battlefield, the man or woman next to you in the battlefield is willing to die for you. Folks, I wrote a book on team build that was 200 pages long and not as good as what my son said that night. That's what makes teamwork work. And the good news is very few of us will ever in the room have to put our lives on the line to prove our commitment. And yet, when you know that the people you work with, you are as committed to their success and spiritual well-being and health as they are to yours, that's when you have a team that's every bit as strong as the United States Marine Corps. Number one, I hope you love what you do. I hope you love who you do it with. And you can see this one coming a mile away. But there's a slight twist that I cannot share at the end of a corporate speech. I hope you love who you do it for. The people who give you their money, choose you over a competitor, allow you to stay in business. And normally when I speak in corporate America, that's my final point. But today when I say I hope you love who you do it for, you realize that what you do and who you do it with and who you do it for is ultimately doing it for Him. Because when you love what you do and who you do it with and who you do it for, that's when you most take delight in glory in the Lord. Thank you. And Godspeed.